Hello and a very warm welcome to the Late Breaking F1 podcast presented by Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, on this non-race Sunday. The worst kind of Sunday, but we're here nonetheless, Sam. We've got a lot to talk through anyway.
Loads to chat through, and you'll upset everyone that isn't just a fan of F1 because obviously Le Mans has been happening this weekend. So when you're saying on race Sunday, we definitely just mean on F1 race Sunday. We promise that there is other things to watch but F1.
Well, I would have called it a race Sunday, but both of my Alpine teams are already out because they can't do any form of racing, so it's not a race weekend anymore.
Well, mate, when it's just you and Trent Alexander-Arnold building the cars,
he's playing for England. He can't do anything.
A podcast. He's playing for England. That's why the car's not working. Either of you two are actually working properly.
Yeah. Oh, well, never mind. Back to F1 next week. Obligatory shout out, of course, at this moment in time. We are just a couple weeks away and 2 days from our live show in the United Kingdom, in London, previewing the British Grand Prix. For those of you that have already bought tickets, thank you so much. For anyone who's thinking of coming along, obviously you don't have too much longer. So as usual, the link is in the description. All the details that you need are there. And we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible.
That we do.
We have a lot to talk through, though. We're gonna run through later on in the show our top 5 performances of the season so far from any driver at any race. So it'll be interesting to see how our lists compare on that one. Jacques Villeneuve's made some interesting comments at Daniel Ricciardo. We're finally getting to that, and don't worry, just because Harry Eid isn't here today doesn't mean he might not have a few things to say about that one. We're going to run through potential Alpine replacements for Esteban Ocon for 2025. But we're going to start with the focus on Lewis Hamilton. So P4 in Canada, after nearly getting his first podium of the year. That's now 12 races without one for him. He went on to call it one of his worst races of all time. And post-race, Toto Wolff came over the team radio, said, and I'm not going to do the accent, Lewis, the positive is the car is back in performance and we get on from here. And this was met by silence from Lewis Hamilton. So are you concerned at this point in the season, Sam? Because we still have a long way to go in this relationship.
Yeah, not just silence, but you know, when camera was on Lewis, you could see him shaking his head as the message came over the radio from Toto. And if Lewis Hamilton is calling this one of his worst performances of all time, and he finished in 4th, then God forbid what he thinks every other driver might have been up to in his career, because 4th place for most drivers would be a bloody great day. So Lewis Hamilton declared, I mean, he's his own harshest critic, and we've seen that before. He does hold himself to an incredibly high standard, as you should. When you're a 7-time world champion, you know, you've got to make sure that you absolutely reach for the best that you could possibly achieve out of everyone. So I guess it makes sense. But what is worrying here, I think, is the dynamic between team and driver. Obviously, this announcement has come so early on in the year that it means that Mercedes have, I think it'd be rude to say, checked out of one side of the relationship. But it's very clear that there is a priority to George, and that's totally acceptable. You know, you've got a driver that's committed to you long term. He is your future at this point, and one of your drivers is leaving. No matter how much you've achieved with that driver, there's always going to be one that is going to take precedence, and it makes sense to favour the guy that's sticking around, that is committing himself loyally to you for another year. The other one is going to a rival, like a long-term rival at that. But equally, it must be so frustrating for Lewis Hamilton to sit there and think, I've given so much to this team, we've won so much together, we've got such a history together, and now I've got to sit here through 24 races of the car's rubbish, my teammate gets priority. That's how it seems from his point of view, I think, at least. The upgrades go to George first. He's beating me in every qualifying and almost every Grand Prix, even though the points tally is actually quite small between them. I think it's only about 15 points between them.
Yep.
You know, George is outright beating him in almost every turn here. I can see why Lewis is maybe feeling a little bit frustrated and a bit kind of disgruntled at how the season is going so far. But he's got a real challenge on his hands, and he's in an environment that isn't 100% built around him for the first time in a long time, and he's not performing at his best. I think that's very clear to see. He believes he's not performing at his best. So I don't think it's just the relationship between himself and Mercedes is strained. I do think he's probably no longer at the peak of his powers. I think that's quite clear. So those two things combined, I'm sure, are causing him some slight frustrations. And we've all been in jobs before where you think, God, I've had enough of this. I just need a fresh start. I just need to go somewhere else. I need a different manager. I need a different co-worker. I want a different environment, and it refreshes you and it perks you back up again. Maybe that's what Lewis is looking for, and he's struggling with that, and he just needs to get his head around the rest of this season, and we might see him revitalized. But I don't know if it's going to be a shoo-in that Hamilton turns up to Ferrari and he's 2019 Lewis Hamilton all over again. I do think he's just where he is right now. What do you think, Ben?
Firstly, just to apologise to anyone on YouTube, because I was just trying to work out why my camera wasn't working. So the first 2.5 minutes or so are bye-bye. No, it didn't happen. But I think it's now working. So good. I'm going to wave at you. And if I'm waving at nothing, then so be it. Am I concerned for the rest of this season? Many are. I'm not. I'm not overly concerned for the rest of this season, because Hamilton has always, and I mean from 2007, the start of his F1 career, dealt in what I would refer to as hyperbolic comments and statements. He has always exaggerated when it comes to being in the car over team radio to Pete Bonington, whether it's in the media pen after races. And it's completely understandable as well. I don't hold it against him. He's not the only one who does it, but he might be the worst offender of that, where he says it's his worst race of all time. I think he knows deep down it wasn't. I'm not saying it was one of his best, but equally, he's had far worse than the one we had in Canada. But I tend to think that if he wasn't being hyperbolic, like he was in his championship-winning years, that would be more concerning than him actually being like he was when he was winning everything. If he came out after the Canadian Grand Prix and said, right, P4, best result of the season, happy with that, and that was it, I would have been concerned, because that's not Lewis Hamilton. That is someone who is settling for a 4th place finish. That's someone who is content with where they are. And if that was the case, that does worry me with a long way to go in the season. The fact that he was unhappy with P4, the fact that, he clearly felt like there was more in that weekend, which I think is true. And I think I said this in the review after the Canadian race, that if he had started from pole, I'm not saying this would have happened, but he would have backed himself to have won that race, I think. And even if he didn't, I think a top 3 finish would have been on the cards for him. So for him to, at the end of this Grand Prix, know that there was more on the table gives me confidence that actually for the rest of this season, he is going to push on. And where there are opportunities for this car and this team, he will do everything he can to take advantage of that. And you're absolutely right. His year to this point has been, I would say, average by normal standards and poor by Hamilton standards.
Compared with last year as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Hamilton was, top 5 performer last year, I would say, maybe even top 3. Like he was right up there. This year, as our power rankings would indicate, and if you're not part of the Patreon, you can go ahead in the link and listen to our power rankings episodes after every single Grand Prix. You'll notice that he hasn't scored particularly well throughout the whole of this season. Yet despite all of that, and only out qualifying George Russell once so far, as you said, it's 14 points. 14 points separates George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, which isn't too bad at all, given it probably could and should be more than that. I think what is going to separate Hamilton and Russell, because I think your point is right in that they will favour Russell from here on out, and they should do. It makes 100% sense at this stage in both of their careers and who's staying at the team. I think Hamilton's motivation might well be more race to race, if that makes sense. I think if the car gives him something to work with, he'll be fully motivated. If he doesn't, there's not too much for him to fight for, whereas George Russell's motivation is probably a little more big picture, longer term, because he knows championship-wise, it's not going to happen this year, but maybe in future years it could do. So, I'm not as concerned as quite a lot of others are. I think Hamilton's still got a lot to give this team, and I think he will give his best. But like I said, I think it could be, and I'm interested to know your thoughts on this, Sam, I think it could be a little bit more dependent on the car. Now we've seen Mercedes at Canada show a little bit more than what they have done in previous races. If they can show that similar level of pace at other Grand Prix throughout the rest of this year, I'm more encouraged. If they go back to where they were, I don't know, any other race where they might be the 5th fastest team, then I'm a little bit more concerned.
I think for me, the division is he checked out of Formula One and racing right now and needs the move to Ferrari to revitalize both his passion for the sport and his talent, because obviously you perform well when you're in a comfortable, happy place. Or is he just simply checked out of Mercedes-Benz and the relationship that he's got there at the moment? And there's a lot of LH fans out there on social media who have been very passionately commenting on the Mercedes social media posts that Lewis is regularly being ignored. They forgot his second place in the sprint race at China when they were talking about George Russell's third place in Canada, saying that it was the only silverware that they picked up so far this year, and everyone else went, "Wow, a minute, Lewis has already picked up a plaque in China." So
never respected Mercedes more than discount spreads. Go on, Merc.
I knew you loved it. But equally, Mercedes fans and LH fans are dividing. And I wonder if there is a bit of a friction there that we're seeing. And I'm not sure whether I'm on board with it or not, but it's very interesting that it's becoming a bit of a social narrative that Mercedes are also trying to distance themselves from Lewis Hamilton. And it does make sense because he's such a powerhouse, right? He's such a character. He's an aura within Formula One. Many people have said that Lewis Hamilton is bigger than Formula One itself. And whether right or wrong, it's what an argument I would look at you and go, "You're an absolute idiot for saying that." I can understand your argument there. So it kind of makes sense that a brand as big as Mercedes, which has been so tied in to Lewis Hamilton's brand for so long, needs to slowly stretch themselves away and go, "We're a bigger brand than that. We're about, George Russell, the new driver that's coming on, Toto Wolff, the team within the car that we're building. We're not just Lewis Hamilton." So that from that point, it makes sense. But on the track, I do think we're starting to see those cracks form with that relationship. I do think that the internal workings and the culture that's forming around Lewis Hamilton leaving is causing some tension. It's causing some difficulties. I imagine that Lewis isn't getting the most out of his car and his setups because he's not as comfortable with going out there and being part of the team. Despite him and George racing very, very hard, you could see that he didn't want to let George pass, right? You could see that it wasn't put for the team. He wanted to stay in front there. So whilst I don't think he's checked out of Formula One, and I think he will be revitalized at Ferrari, I do think this is just going to be a bit of a slog year for him. I do think it's going to be a bit of a head down. If the car's right, cool, I can do what Lewis Hamilton does. If it's not, oh well, I'm going to have a crap time, and it's going to be a difficult end to the year, and I'll just get on with it, which is a shame to end such an iconic partnership as Hamilton and Mercedes. Almost what feels like a bit of a downbeat.
Yeah, and it's important to bear in mind as well that the Hamilton-Mercedes relationship, most people would consider to go back just over 10 years to 2013 when he came on board. Bear in mind that throughout all of his McLaren days and all of his junior, the relationship with Mercedes pretty much goes back to the turn of the century. So
yeah, it's about at least 20 years old, I would say.
Yeah, so it might even go back to the late 90s. It's that long. So yeah, it is a big relationship that is going, and it is going to be odd. I think the one thing that Mercedes can take solace from is that regardless of whether Hamilton is on 10 out of 10 form this season, 6 out of 10 form, or somewhere in the middle, he's not gonna win them a championship. He's not going to cost them a championship. That's not happening. That car has not been anywhere near quick enough and won't be. And I think even if the way that the current regulations are working, Mercedes are very much focused on winning and winning only. They can't do that this year. So, whether they finish, let's say they have a great end to the season, they catch McLaren for third, or they have a terrible end to the season and they lose out to Aston Martin for fifth, or something like that, it kind of doesn't matter too much, because if the worse they end up, the more wind tunnel time they get next year. And if Mercedes aren't that bothered about whether it ends up being third, fourth, or fifth, then maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. So I think Mercedes have a little bit of a luxury in that regard, where they can be... I'm not saying they want to give away finishing positions, of course. I'm just saying that it's not massively costly if they do.
On the flip side to that, if they were to turn up to Spain, and I mean it's Spain, so maybe that's the outlier, but for the rest of the season, and have a car equal to Red Bull, I know that Lewis Hamilton would turn it back on. I still have full faith that he will go, wait, I can win races here. And he will deliver almost the Lewis Hamilton we saw in Singapore last year, right? Where he was on the tail of the leaguers the entire race. George Russell makes the mistake. Hamilton capitalizes. I genuinely think that if the car was there, he would still be motivated enough to go for it. But it's different when you're a 7-time world champion to go, oh, well, what's the point? I don't need to put in 100%. I can still be frustrating at the season. We're not winning anything regardless. So when I've won that much, what's the point in doing my absolute all? But I do think he'd turn it on immediately if a race-winning car was given to him.
Yeah, I think that's entirely plausible. And it can be very entertaining. A driver going race to race can be very entertaining in terms of going out for race wins, because we know that if Hamilton, or indeed some of these other drivers were in that spot, they know there's not a championship on the line. You could argue that if something goes really right or really wrong for Red Bull, then maybe one of the Ferraris or McLarens could pose a challenge. I think it's unlikely, but it's not the most unlikely thing in the world. But Mercedes, it's just not going to happen. So where Hamilton is at in his Mercedes career, he knows he can go out there all guns blazing. The other drivers around him might not necessarily be in that same spot. So that could, again, it's reliant on Mercedes actually performing well outside of just 2 Grand Prix a year. That could present some interesting opportunities.
Agreed.
Okay, let's take our first break on this episode. On the other side, we're going to try and work out who might replace Esteban Ocon at Alpine.
Oh, bloody hell.
Me. Okay, it's seemingly a every episode occurrence at this point, but Alpine are back on the schedule again. We did promise when Esteban Ocon, the news came out that he would not be re-signing for Alpine in 2025, that we would at some point discuss who might his replacement be. So in the first instance, I think we'll just list out who we think are the contenders and what are the pros and cons for each of those. And then a little bit later in the segment, we'll reveal who we think should get it and who we think will get it. But let's just run through the contenders in the first instance. Who do you think is a possibility at this stage, Sam?
Jacques Villeneuve is the first name that springs to mind. Obviously, the current reserve driver for Alpine. He's had time in the practice sessions. He's been a long-standing servant of the French team now, and he's a fairly reliable driver as a pro for him. He's relatively consistent, but Kong's being not the outright fastest. He's aged a little bit. I know that sounds awful because he's still so young.
He's like 21 or something.
It's horrible. Closer to 30, much closer to 30. But, when you look at the drivers that are being spoken about for other teams, he is older. He is an older driver now, which is awful. So that doesn't help. And his junior career isn't shining with trophies. And, it's not a glittering cabinet there, unlike some other rivals he might go up against. But for me, the first name that does spring to mind as an easy option for Alpine is Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, he's on my contender list as well, for the reasons that you gave. Obviously, he, like you say, he's been the reserve driver at the team for 2024 and 2023, but he's been with the academy since 2021 as well, which is highly important. I do think he's a solid overtaker, and I think similar to... He's always had a trait very similar to what Mick Schumacher, who might well come up in this discussion a little bit later on, where he gets better as years go on and he gets better as championships go on. So if we think about F2, for example, he has a fairly good record in F2. He's P6 in his first year, which is best rookie, and then he was P3 last year. But in both instances, he was better at the end of the season than the start. In fact, last year he won 3 of the last 5 feature races, which is an impressive achievement given the amount of quality that we see in F2. But you're absolutely right with the weaknesses, in that he's not outright the best driver. He's not outright the fastest driver. He has had an okay junior record without ever being brilliant. And out the box pace, I think you can probably call it, is a bit of a concern. If you look back, and I appreciate we're going back to F3 here, but his first season in F3 was a real struggle. He didn't score any points, which his teammate, I think it was Jake Hughes at the time, he had over 100. And I know Jake Hughes was more experienced. I know Jacques Villeneuve was far younger, but to score no points in an F3 campaign is a worry. And similarly, when he got to F2, it didn't click right away. I'm not saying that it does for every driver and it's always the same thing, but those are probably the main concerns about Jacques Villeneuve. Out of interest, if it was Jacques Villeneuve, they've got a lot of free practice sessions to play with for the rest of this year. How many do they utilise for him?
Every single one.
Everyone.
Why give Esteban Ocon the third one? I mean, maybe for sprint weekends, put Ocon in the free practice one because he's going to have to take place, of course, during the actual race.
That'd be so cruel.
Esteban, you're still not getting the practice. Jumping for qualifying, mate. I'm sure he'd be very happy with that. But no, apart from the sprint weekends, I would get him as comfortable as possible with how the cars are functioning. The differences between the current year's cars and next year's cars are very, very minor. So it will allow him to have essentially we've got 16 races left of the season. He would have 16 hours in a Formula One car on real tracks that he's going to be going to next year, and he can perform all sorts of race pace, qualifying runs. They could do a whole session for him every single time. It would make a lot of sense to really settle him in and allow him to become fully comfortable. And he's got the luxury and the privilege of having that opportunity. He's not with another team at the moment. He's got direct access to all the data and all the understanding. He really could embed himself properly, and he should be, nipping at the heels of that to go, put me in more. What's the harm? You're getting rid of that guy anyway. Put me in the team now. I would use that as a selling point if I was Jack Doohan.
Who do you think are some of the other contenders outside of Doohan?
I think the other one that was also part, which we've spoken about previously as well, which is part of the Alpine driver program, is Zhou Guanyu. Zhou Guanyu, of course, ex-Alpine driver program, currently in Formula One, of course, with Sauber stake becoming Audi. It looks like he's unlikely to join Nico Hülkenberg as the driver alongside them when they go into the Audi seat. They're still in decision of that, but there's a lot of drivers in contention for that secondary Sauber seat. And I must admit that Zhou, other than the sponsorship opportunities, does not shine at the very top of that. His form has been worse than Bottas consistently. He's never kicked on from his first season. And I would argue he is a bottom 5 Formula One driver right now. But his appeal, of course, outside of Formula One, is the Chinese market. And Renault have been incredibly open in their sale of cars, saying that they would love to break into the Chinese market. They believe it's an absolute gold mine. Fair enough. It quite possibly is. It makes sense to access a market so rich and deep in people and size. So I think it makes sense to rekindle that relationship for Alpine and for Zhou. He's a relatively safe pair of hands. I don't think he'd rock the boat with Gasly as his teammate. He's a pretty nice guy to get along with. And I also think he brings opportunities outside of the car. If Alpine have a car that suddenly can compete for wins, that's where Zhou lets you down. If they've got a car that's racing where it is now, Gasly will pick up the points. Zhou will be in there behind him, and there's no competition in the order there either. So it's a relatively nice and compliant option for them that I think it has outside benefits.
Yeah, so I'd agree with Zhou as a contender. Obviously, he's got recent F1 experience. You forget that this is his third full season. So compared to some of the other options, not only does he have F1 experience, but he has current F1 experience, both of which very handy. And I do think he would get up to speed relatively quickly based on what we saw in the Alfa Romeo in his first season. He was right there really from Bahrain in terms of like his level. Now, of course, that leads on to one of the weaknesses, which is we haven't really seen anything beyond that, which year 3 compared to year 1, you've got to see improvement, and there hasn't been a lot of it. And if there isn't, which I don't think there has been, you're unlikely, I think, to see change between year 3 and year 5. So the fact that he's ex-Alpine Academy, the Chinese market, are both definite positives for him, but like you say, it's just pure pace-wise, he's not the best option out there. He is a definite downgrade from Esteban Ocon in that regard. And like you say, if Alpine would get into... The issue would be if the car was quick and could compete for wins. So what we're essentially saying here is if the car does its job, we have a problem. That's not what you want. So that's definitely his weakness. It's not like any other team is massively interested in him, right? Including his own team. I don't think he's above 3rd in the pecking order there.
I think that's the problem that Alpine have at the moment anyway. All these drivers that we're going to list through, and I think there's a few more that we can go through, none of them are particularly groundbreaking superstars. None of them are bloody high-quality assets that other teams are all nipping at the heels to get hold of, right? And that almost is an appealing feature for someone like Jack Doohan, for example, who goes, yeah, okay, these are all current F1 drivers, but what have they achieved? What are they going for? At least I'm a fresh pair of eyes. I could do something different. You don't know what I'm capable of. It might be an argument for him.
Yes, for sure. I'll add Mick Schumacher into the mix here. I think he's probably unlikelier, but I think he is worth a shout. Obviously, he has that Alpine link. He drives for them in the World Endurance Championship when the car is working, which is very rarely. I still list him being an F2 champion as a strength. He has shown in junior formula that he has got the ability to get that done. And there were sparks in 2022. 2021 is almost a complete write-off based on how poor the car was. 2022, I'm not saying it was a good year by any stretch. He was the slower of the two Haas drivers alongside Magnussen. But there were a couple of races in there that showed that there might be something there. But the weaknesses, of course, are... There's a reason that Haas got rid of him. Very, very plainly put. He will have had 2 years out of F1 at that point, which isn't the end of the world, but equally isn't always easy to pick up again straight away. So yeah, and he was expensive at his time at Haas in terms of breaking the car. So yeah, I think it's an unlikelier shout.
I agree. Mick Schumacher is definitely a name that should be mentioned on this list, but he would be one of the lowest names on this list for me, which is a shame because, it was almost a nice romantic story to always have, Michael's son in the sport and possibly going to achieve something. But he's a good race driver. Just don't know if he's Formula One capable. Another name I want to mention, maybe a bit of an outside option, but there's a certain Visa Cash App RB seat that's not been signed on yet, and that driver used to race for Renault. If he doesn't get signed up, that is Daniel Ricciardo for another year at the junior program. He has got previous ties with the French outfit that was, of course, Renault, now Alpine. It will allow them to have a bit of a superstar signing. It will give them some personality. It might allow them to build up some of their image. And with that superstar Hollywood investment that they've got, it might be quite an appealing option for them. Daniel Ricciardo is loved and adored in pretty much every market he ever walks into, especially North America. It could be an outside option that if he doesn't grab that seat and wants to remain in Formula One, it might be an option for him.
Yeah, I didn't have Ricciardo on my list, but I can't knock that logic. At the moment, it seems a little more likely than not he will stay with V-Carb, but V-Carb. But yeah, it's still very much in the... I mean, Liam Lawson is still there, so there is still a decision to be made. The last name on... So I had 4 names on my list, Du and Joe Schumacher. The last name, I think, is a possibility, and I think this might be a little bit of an outsider. I've got Valtteri Bottas on this list. I think he is, of all the names that I've said there, and Daniel Ricciardo, if he was a contender, is a bit of an unknown, but I think Bottas is the only possible replacement that could match Esteban Ocon in terms of pace. And of course, experience-wise, Bottas has been in F1 for over 10 years, so there's not too many drivers that can boast that. In terms of... And I don't even know if I want to call this a weakness. Well, he's not a driver for the future. That is known. The other potential... I'm pretty certain that Bottas wants a multi-year deal. Do Alpine give that to him? That could also be a strength, because... If we're putting it, let's be honest, if Valtteri Bottas is putting together his list of I want these teams, Sauber and Williams might be 1 and 2, Alpine's probably number 3. I'm not certain if the other 2 teams would give him a multi-year deal. If Alpine are willing to give him a 2-year deal, that might open the door for them.
Bottas is such an intriguing one because he's got all the talents to pick up a big drive, right? He's a race winner. He's a pole sitter. He's helped win constructors' titles. He's battled alongside arguably the greatest driver of all time in Lewis Hamilton and has beat him outright at times. But he's also been driving around in an absolute trash can for the last couple of years, and it's very difficult to display any kind of form or any success story when you're so far down the grid. But we've seen it. It's gone under the radar, and I argue that means that in theory teams should have seen it, that Bottas is driving well. I think a problem for Bottas right now with a driver who's also on the market that is not going to go to Alpine, I don't think, is that Carlos Sainz is also available. And I think wherever Bottas could go, Carlos Sainz could also go and provide more. He's younger. He's more in his prime at the moment. He's coming from Ferrari directly. He's very desirable. So for someone like Williams, for example, if Bottas is available, well, why isn't Sainz available, right? If they can pick up Sainz instead, that pushes Bottas out. And that's the risk that we're currently seeing in the driver market. The final name, Ben, which I'm shocked that you haven't mentioned, is Théo Pourchaire.
It's not going to happen.
It's never going to get a drive, is it? No. There's obviously a link there, being that they're both French, and Alpine love to have a patriotic lineup, despite kicking one of them straight to the curb. And he's doing all right in IndyCar, and he did very well in the junior formula. And Ben, you've been flying his flag since Dawn existed, since dog was a boy, you were waving the Théo Pourchaire flag. But I do think it's an outside choice. I'd argue that if you had to pick between Jacques Doohan and Théo Pourchaire, I might take a punt on Pourchaire over Jacques Doohan just because of the junior Formula record, and now he's in Indy battling some really great drivers. But yeah, it's all up in the air on that one.
3 youngest F2 champions of all time: George Russell, Charles Leclerc, and Théo Pourchaire.
Get him in the sport.
2 of them got in straight away. 1 of them has never been in F1. Make it make sense. Yeah, the only reason I didn't have him on my list is I just don't think they'll do it because it makes sense. Who should they go for?
I don't. The worst part is I don't know. I put that list together.
Harry?
Literally, I know. He's taken over my mind and soul. I am Harry Eid for a moment. It's good to see you, Harry. I actually don't know. I think this is where lies the issue for Alpine. And this is the point I was making earlier, that no one is a superstar. I think Daniel Ricciardo as the option, who might be the best PR move, is past it. I love him, but he is in these current cars not able to produce the previous form that he had. And we're going to move on to Jacques Villeneuve's comments shortly. And you will hear from Harry Eid. Valtteri Bottas, age-wise, is ticking on a little bit. And I don't know what longevity he offers to Alpine. And I love him. Everyone knows I love the Bottas, right? He's amazing. But I don't know what he gives Alpine to build something around. Zhou Guanyu, okay, the market is great. As a race car driver, I don't think he's good enough for Alpine. Jacques Doohan, I don't think he's good enough for Alpine, although he might be loyal to you long term. Théo Pourchaire's a bit of a risk. You know, it's awkward to choose on that side. I just don't know if there's and Mick Schumacher, we've already talked about the issues there. I don't know if there's a real fit there for them. Everything feels like a bit of a stopgap solution. Ben, do you have an answer? Do you think there's one they definitely should go for?
I don't think it's necessarily one great answer. I think it's there's nothing, like you say, there's nothing really that fits. So you go with the best of the bad. I don't want to say bad options, but best of the okay options. The best option is keeping Esteban Ocon, but we've already mentioned that. Sign Bottas. And if he wants a 2-year deal, fine. I don't love it, but I would sign Bottas to a 2-year deal over the other options, just because I think it's the only one they've got that could, again, replace Esteban Ocon like for like. I think pace-wise they are fairly similar. I would still take Ocon in all honesty, but I think Bottas could be a match for Pierre Gasly in a way that I don't think any of the other drivers could do. And actually, if they want Valtteri Bottas, and again, it seems as if it's unlikely, they need to make that move, in my opinion, as soon as possible. And this relates back to what you mentioned about Sainz and how he is essentially a younger, slightly better version of Bottas, which I don't think is unfair. The thing is, you've got Sauber and Williams. There is a very realistic situation where those 2 teams fight it out over Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz picks the winner, and the consolation prize for the other team is Valtteri Bottas. That is very likely. I don't know which way round, but that's very likely. And Alpine at that point will be like, okay, well, guess it's Jacques Doohan then, which might be what they want to do anyway. But if they do want to seriously consider Bottas, they need to make a move now. And I do think the key is offering 2 years, because if it's 1 year, I don't think he considers it.
Poor Bottas has just had continual 1-year deals thrown at him. And he's
exactly.
Yeah, I know.
That's why he's so desperate. Yeah,
give him some love. I think you're right. I think Bottas is 35 in August, right? So he's probably into his final half a decade at most of Formula One racing here, because he's not Alonso, he's not Lewis Hamilton. He hasn't got that top level ceiling. So take him now or don't take him at all, I think is the right vibe. I
think they will take Doohan. I think Doohan is what will happen.
I think it's a safe and logical move to take Doohan, right? He's got the loyalty, he knows the team, he's embedded in. If they've got, they could do with Doohan what they should have done with Piastri, right? And get him in and build a team around him and grow a team with him there. Don't throw this one away as well, because Doohan isn't a bad choice. He's just not electric. He just doesn't get you super excited.
And the thing, I would completely understand promoting Jacques Doohan, and the reason is not necessarily regarding Doohan himself. It's more relating to the junior program as a whole, because, like you say, we know what happened with Piastri. They would have hired him, but he went elsewhere. But actually, if you look back at Alpine Academy and before it, the Renault Driver Academy, It's a very limited list of those that have been promoted. In fact, and this is a quiz question if I've ever heard one, the last graduate to Renault in F1, Romain Grosjean in 2009.
Crikey, I was going to say Jolyon Palmer, but he was Mercedes, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, they've taken their chances on a few, like, inexperienced drivers, but in terms of, like, being promoted purely from the academy, I think you have to go all the way back to the middle of 2009 when they replaced Nelson Piquet Jr., which is a story in its own right. But I'm not saying they've had a wealth of talent since then, but if you don't promote Jack Doohan now, what message does that send to any driver in F3 and F2 that might consider joining your program? Because Zhou Guanyu went elsewhere. He was in the Alpine Academy, or the Renault Academy. Christian Lundgaard never got the opportunity. Jack Aitken, I'm not saying he deserved to be in F1, but he was Renault's reserve driver for 2 years. His opportunity in F1 came via Williams. Like, they're not promoting their talent. So what indication do you... It's a poorly run team that aren't very competitive and don't give a chance to young drivers. That's not a great advertisement.
Yeah, what have you got going for you?
Yeah.
What, you need one thing, and the one thing you had was your driver lineup, which was solid, and then you threw it away.
Well, there we go. We come back to that again. We'll take our second break on this episode. On the other side, we're getting into it. Jacques Villeneuve's comments about Daniel Ricciardo.
Good.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. We finally got to it, which is Jacques Villeneuve's controversial comments on Sky F1 over the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, directed towards Daniel Ricciardo. Here's what he had to say. Why is he still in F1? We are hearing the same thing now for the last 4 or 5 years. We have to make the car better for him. Poor him. Sorry, it's been 5 years of that. No, you are in F1. Maybe you make that effort for Lewis Hamilton, who has won multiple championships. You don't make that effort for a driver that can't cut it. If you can't cut it, go home. There's someone else to take your place. That's how it's always been in racing. It's the pinnacle of the sport. There's no reason to keep going and to keep finding excuses. You all talk about that first season or first 2 seasons. He was beating a Vettel that was burnt out, that was trying to invent things with the car to go and win and just making a mess of his weekends. Then he was beating for half a season Verstappen, when Verstappen was 18 years old, just starting. Then that was it. He stopped beating anyone after that. It's quite a lot in there, Sam, to digest, but your thoughts on his comments?
I have to applaud his rant, really. It was amusing. It was very entertaining. Factually not correct in multiple occasions, but funny. And I always enjoy it when, you know what, as we said this, and I'm sure Harry will get into his rant properly, and I'll let him. I haven't listened to it.
It's an all-timer, folks.
Is it?
It's
right,
an all-timer.
I'm going to let Harry do a lot of the talking then, because Harry doesn't get annoyed about a lot, but that's going to be good. Yeah, the whole beating the teammates thing, he beat Sebastian Vettel after coming off of a 4-year winning streak. He's not burnt out. Sebastian Vettel was the reigning world champion. He turns up in year 1 in a senior team, beats him. And he was so good. He beats him. Max Verstappen was good from the moment he was born. The guy was better at everything that I've ever tried to do from the moment he could walk and talk. And Daniel Ricciardo held his own comfortably against Max Verstappen. He did a fantastic job. And some of the race wins that Daniel Ricciardo put together in the teen years during the hybrid period were some of the best from that period. China always springs to mind just how good that race win was for him. And in a car that was not the best car at all, he delivered fantastically. And then he goes to Renault. Took him about a season, starts beating Hulkenberg. And Hulkenberg is no slouch whatsoever at all. And then, goes to McLaren. It doesn't work out well for him. And I agree with a tiny portion of what he's saying, that we can't keep having comments like we've got to make the car better for him, especially when the teammate in the same car is delivering, right? You look at what Yuki Tsunoda has been able to do this season so far. He has been better than Daniel Ricciardo. And I do think that the current ground effect cars do not suit Daniel Ricciardo's driving style. That's fine. He's maybe not perfectly placed anymore, but that does not mean that Daniel Ricciardo is crap. It doesn't mean he needs to go home. It doesn't mean that he's absolutely washed. Daniel Ricciardo was an absolute talent, and in 10, 15 years' time, he might be one of those drivers that we say, God, drivers that we're surprised never won a world title or never won more races. Daniel Ricciardo will be one of those names that comes up, I think, more frequently than you expect. But Jacques Villeneuve, mate, pack it in. Wind your neck in, mate. You've absolutely gone off on a Jacques Villeneuve run. And that, you shouldn't be surprised that he's come out with something like this. But amusing as it was, I disagree with a lot of it. I do think that Daniel Ricciardo's off his peak, and we should stop treating him as if he is one of the best drivers in Formula One, because I don't think he is anymore. But I do not want to discredit what he got up to in the last decade of his career, which is better than what so many racing drivers could ever even imagine achieving. He was phenomenal and deserves the credit for doing so. Ben, I shall hand it over to you.
Okay. I think it's somewhat of a mixed bag, what he said here. So I think some of it is fair. And when I say fair, I'm not necessarily saying I fully agree with him or fully disagree with it. I'm just saying it is fair for him to have an opinion. It's completely valid. His opinion is as valid as anyone else's. So some of it, I think, is completely fair, what he's saying. Some of it is not quite so fair. So his overall point of asking why he's in F1 and it's been the same thing for the last 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years might be a stretch, but fine. Okay, that is a point that not only he is making, many others have also made the same point, that he has had a lot of opportunities in the last couple of years that he's not taking advantage of. I think that is absolutely fine. Even the point on him beating Vettel and why he was beating him, I 100% disagree with him on that, and I agree with you that he deserves a lot more credit for what he did in 2014 than what Villeneuve is giving him here. But again, it is an opinion. There's no way of fully knowing what the reasons were. It was a new era. Vettel had just won 4 world championships. Red Bull's dominance had gone. Mercedes' dominance was in. There was a lot going on in that season. If he thinks that's the reason, okay, I can't disprove it, so I'm okay with that opinion. What I do have a problem with, and it's the same thing you have a problem with, Sam, is that he is presenting some lies as facts, and that I can't stand for. He was beating Verstappen for half a season is not true. Verstappen made his debut for Red Bull at the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix, so Ricciardo and Verstappen, at least in 2016, had 3/4 of a season, 2/3 of a season together as teammates. Ricciardo scored more points. They came back and were teammates again in 2017. Ricciardo scored more points. It wasn't until 2018 when Verstappen beat Ricciardo. And if he had made the point that Verstappen was only 18 years old, he was only just getting into the sport, therefore I think this achievement holds less value, I would say, okay, fine. Again, I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but I don't have to. But the fact that he's misrepresenting what happened, I have a problem with. And the same thing about him beating no one since. Hülkenberg and Ocon are 2 very good drivers that he beat quite convincingly in his Renault days, and he deserves more, he deserves far more credit for what he did at Renault than what he gets.
The podiums were crazy that he pulled out of that car.
He was very good in that car.
Very good.
Sure, and everything since then has been a disappointment. I don't think many would disagree with that. And if you think he's not worthy of a seat in F1 because it's a case of what have you done for me lately, okay. I haven't got a problem with it. The only thing I do have a problem with is where you are making a case with outright lies.
It is interesting, though, that we're about to hear from Harry Eade about a man that he has despised since he was 1 year old, about a man that he has loved since he knew he existed. So it really is a passionate moment for Harry Eade.
Yes, we'll hand over to him now. This one goes a few minutes, folks.
Good, okay.
It's good fun.
Hello, everyone. I'm not supposed to be on this podcast, but Sam and Ben thought it'd be really funny if I recorded something about Jacques Villeneuve because they like to see me suffer. Look, for the overall point, I guess, that Jacques Villeneuve is getting at here, I can sort of get on board with in terms of Daniel Ricciardo and where he sits in the sport now. And I agree, he's not necessarily the driver he once was, and does he still deserve a seat? I think it's up for discussion. However, his comparison, his analogy for why Daniel Ricciardo shouldn't be in F1 hurts me to my core because it's rubbish. It's flawed logic. Because up until a couple of years ago, Daniel Ricciardo made a living out of beating teammates. Is the reason I always used to pick him with teammate awards is because any teammate he'd beat. And I'm sad he doesn't do that anymore. But come on. 2012, he doesn't beat Jev. Fine, it's his first year. 2013, he beats Jev. 2014, he beats Sebastian Vettel. 15, he only just loses out to Kvyat, but the Red Bull in 15 was crap, so I'm not counting that. 16, he beats Kvyat, he beats Verstappen. 17, he beats Verstappen. 18, he doesn't, but quite frankly, the Red Bull could just kept blowing up in him in 18. He was the better driver that year, so I'm counting that as a win. Then 19, he goes off to Renault. Nico Hülkenberg, who? Don't know, because he wasn't there that year, apparently. He beats him. 2020, Esteban Ocon comes along. Nope. No, he doesn't, because Ricciardo beats him convincingly in 2020, and it's only until 2021 where it starts to go downhill. But quite frankly, 21, I maintain is still not as bad as everyone makes out for Ricciardo. He does lose out to Norris, but we know Norris is a top quality driver, and that is not by much. Then we get to 22 onwards, and fine, we'll start to question things. But that analogy of not, barely beating Verstappen and not beating Verstappen, he's Max Verstappen. He's just won 60 races. For goodness sake, Jacques, you're talking about a man who could possibly be one of the greatest of all time, and Daniel Ricciardo beats him over multiple seasons. And what's your record? Oh, you lost out to Jenson Button in his first year as teammates. Oh, you lost out to Felipe Massa and Nick Heidfeld. Oh my God, he infuriates me. I know he does this to get a rise, and it's worked. Oh, I need to lie down. Thank you for that, Seven Ben. That was horrible.
Oh, scathing.
I've never heard Harry Eade more convinced about something in my life.
Go. It made me sink into my seat. If you watch on YouTube, I fully slumped. I felt embarrassed for Jacques at that point.
I don't think he'll ever recover.
No, I think that's the only scolding Harry has in him, and he's used it well. He's got one card on him, and he's played it perfectly.
Well, respect to you, Harry Eade. We'll move on before we lose any members of our team to just blood pressure related reasons. Verstappen, Red Bull, had a bit more, I say a difficult time recently. They're still winning races, at least comparatively, struggling a little bit regarding curb riding. Verstappen believes that Red Bull can fix this issue without compromising the RB20's overwhelming brilliantness in nearly every era. What do you think? Do you think it's achievable? How important is it that they get on top of that issue?
I mean, curbs are a pretty integral part of a racetrack.
Most of them.
They feature pretty much everywhere. So being able to use them, which every other team is able to do, quite crucial to going fast. The only time you don't really want to be touching the curves too much is in absolute torrential downpour, because they'd be slippy. It's Red Bull, and they've got some of the best physicists, aerodynamicists, or whatever they're called, in the world, and chassis builders in the world. So if anyone can fix this issue, I think they can. My only concern here is that I think they will have to compromise on something. And now it's very interesting that they were brilliant at the start of this season. They were brilliant. Something changed, and now they're having a real issue with this curb riding system. So either they need to remove an upgrade, and I use quotation marks, upgrade, because arguably it's caused them a problem, to go back to a previous spec of car that didn't have the curb riding problems. But then there must be a previous issue that they were trying to resolve that they then have to deal with. Or they need to compromise something moving forward in their design. So I do think the solution is available. I do think they can make this happen. It's obviously possible. It's just whether the adjustments to the car that they're going to make are actually beneficial and actually give them the gap to the field that they previously had. I don't think it's buildable again. I don't think that Red Bull are going to be able to come along before the turn of the new regulations in 2026 to restore their half a second lead that they previously had. I think the gap is much closer now. And I think that McLaren understand where they're going. Ferrari, we're going to ignore Canada, understand where they're going. And seemingly, Toto Wolff and Mercedes feel like they're going down the right path as well now. And this always happens as you get to the end of regulations. Everything starts to close up. You remember 2019, 2020, and of course 2021, that, we had a lot of teams starting to nick race wins off of Mercedes. And then eventually, obviously, we had Red Bull take the fight all the way to them. And it's happening now. We're getting that closing up of the regulations again. And I wonder if Red Bull are also kind of going, we've got the edge. Shall we focus on the new stuff rather than what's happening right this very second to take another step forward in the new regulations? It's possible. But I think they'll find a solution. I just don't think they're going to retake the advantage that they once had. What do you think, Ben?
I can say this because I would be very, very happy if I was wrong about this, so I kind of win either way. I do think Red Bull will establish, maybe not completely what they once had, but I think they will establish more of an advantage than what they've had in the last couple of Grand Prix, just because I do think this curb riding issue has been not completely specific to these tracks, but as Verstappen has kind of alluded to before, this isn't a brand new issue. This is an issue they've had for a long time. It's just that it hasn't been enough of a factor at certain races for it to make an impact. And I feel like as we get into some of these summer races, they might have less of an impact than what we saw at Monaco and what we saw at Canada quite specifically. So I think they might have a little bit of time to try and fix this in terms of later in the season when I think it will properly become an issue again. I'm not saying it won't be an issue from now on. It certainly will be. It's just, I think race to race, depending on the track, will just depend on how much it will hurt them. I think the next couple of races, it might not hurt them as much as we... I don't want to say we want it to hurt them, but we want it to be close, naturally.
Yeah, if that's the factor that's bringing the championship together, then I want that to carry on because I want a close championship. What have we got coming up? We've got Spain up next, so that's not a massively curb-heavy track.
No, we've got Spain, Austria, and Silverstone, right?
Silverstone probably the most out of those three where you use a bit of curbing, but even then it's not massive.
We're not talking street circuit level here, are we?
Yeah, so I think maybe Zandvoort might be the next big one.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Yeah.
It's a while away, so you're right. They've got a few months, couple of months to really work this out and sort it out.
But in reality, what they need to do is not solve it for Verstappen's sake, because Verstappen is just about doing enough. They need to solve it for Perez's sake, if he is indeed being impacted as much as... Because we haven't heard much from Perez on this. We've heard more from Verstappen, but presumably it's impacting both drivers. But clearly, in terms of pure results, it's hurting Perez a lot more than Verstappen. So they really need to solve it for his sake, because this Constructors' Championship, I don't think is done and dusted. I think there could be a fight. But the only way there isn't a fight is if Perez ups his performances.
Yeah, making him comfortable in the car again, so he's able to at least pick up regular top four finishes and beat, one of the McLarens, one of the Ferraris at least, while Verstappen goes on winning races, is the way that they feel comfy and happy at the front of the championship. If they can't do that, they may be panicking.
Maybe so. We're going to take our final break on this episode. On the other side, something a bit different. We're going to give our quickfire top 5 for best performances of the season so far.
I struggled.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. As promised, something a little bit different to round out this episode. We've got our top 5 performances of the season so far. We're going to see how our lists compare, but more importantly, we're interested to know what you think as well. If you think there are some great performances that have happened so far this year that maybe have gone under the radar that we haven't included here, let us know how wrong we are. I'll start off. I'll start off with my number 5. Ranking 5 on my list is the only Lando Norris performance on this top 5, but it's not his win in Miami.
That's interesting. Okay.
Now, I do think that was a great performance, don't get me wrong, but I actually think there's another performance that was ever so slightly better than it. So my 5th best performance of the year so far, Lando Norris' second place finish at China. Now, he was a very distant second to Max Verstappen on that day, but that Red Bull and Verstappen were on a different planet. He beat Perez by 5.5 seconds. He beat Charles Leclerc, the next closest non-Red Bull, by 10 seconds. His teammate was all the way down in 8th place, and that was pre-upgrade. That was before this mega Miami update came into play, and he was far more competitive. This was before all of that, so I think it was a highly impressive second-place finish.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that. I mean, it was a fantastic. It just missed out for me. I've got it 6th or 7th. Funny enough, my number 5 is Lando Norris's win at Miami. So, and it is my only Lando Norris feature on the top 5. And we saw, I think, the safety car obviously playing into it, but we all said it on the review just how there was a real chance that he could have won that race without the safety car. The pace was so extreme. He was leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else so that he was around him. He kept Perez behind brilliantly. His tyre saving was fantastic. I really think he was a threat the whole way through that Grand Prix. So even without the safety car, which allowed him to go on a wing anyway. And then when the safety car comes out, he pulls away effortlessly from Max Verstappen.
Was it like
so
9 seconds?
10 seconds, something like that. So to see that kind of domination over someone like Max Verstappen was brilliant. And I he deserves a lot of plaudits. I think I gave him a 10 on our power rankings for that race weekend because it's so deserved.
4th place for you, Sam.
4th place for me. Bit of a rogue one. I've got Yuki Tsunoda at Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that this was a really underrated drive across the grid. And there's a brilliant Reddit page, folks. If you know about Reddit, I sound so old. Have you heard of Reddit?
Can you get that via face Twitter?
Do you know this media that's social? I'm sorry to anyone that's American. I'm doing
Can I
that
Snapchat that?
Yeah. Yuki. Anyway, there's a great page on Reddit, which is Formula 1.5. And they document the winner of Formula 1.5 after every race, which is 10th place. And Yuki won this, but I think he won it through dealing with a lot of traffic. There were a lot of instigations where he had to make a lot of big overtakes to make it work, and he really held his own. Do you remember when about 6 cars all went into the pit lane at once,
yes.
and they, RB managed to pull him out of there, did a fantastic pit stop. I just think it was one of those drives. Obviously, it's his home Grand Prix, which is lovely as well, that really made him shine this season as I'm actually better. I'm good. I'm doing a great job, and that for me has tipped him up there as. He really deserves his place in F1 at the moment. So for me, that really stood out. That was number 4.
That was a great performance. I haven't got that in my top 5. The only reason is Bottas should have been there. But
fair.
It was still a great performance. I'm pretty sure I gave that like an 8 out of 10 or something on power rankings. My number 4, so in the same vein as Lando Norris was 5th place, that was his only placement on this list, and it wasn't his win. In 4th, I've got Charles Leclerc, his only placement on this list, but again, not his win. As good as his Monaco Grand Prix win was, I still think his 2nd place at Saudi Arabia was better. Sorry, his 3rd place at Saudi Arabia was better. He got 2nd place on the grid that day, or the day before. He beat Sergio Perez, which, at this point in the season doesn't sound like much. Back then, when that Red Bull was as good as it was, that was an impressive achievement. He lost out to both Red Bulls in the race. They were far too good. But whereas all of the attention that weekend was understandably on his rookie teammate, Oliver Behrman, his performance was, I think, flawless. He gets the fastest lap. He finishes 3rd place, which is basically a win based on where that Ferrari was. He's 14 seconds clear of Oscar Piastri in 4th, so he has no competition from anyone else. I think it was... I remember thinking about this race and going, what could he have done more? Nope. I really don't think there was anything. So I've got that 4th.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout. And it's one of those ones that I was so... unsure about with where I wanted to place it, because I actually agree. I looked at Charles Leclerc's performances, and I looked at Monaco, and I think I looked at Imola as well, and I looked at Saudi, and I went, one of these deserves to be on here. Funny enough, I actually agree with you. In 3rd place, I have Charlotte. Yeah, so 3rd for me, I have Charlotte from Saudi, because I genuinely believe he could do nothing else. I do not think there was, unless a DNF happened in front of him, I don't think there was a single point on the table that he was unable to grab, and he got everything available to him. So, yeah, for me, Charles was in 3rd for that one.
My 3rd place finisher is Carlos Sainz for his win in Australia. Now, I appreciate this one might be a tad controversial because Verstappen did retire so early on in that Grand Prix. I know he retired, but I genuinely think Sainz might have won that one anyway. And actually, I think the most recent races, I know this was pre-upgrade for the likes of Ferrari and McLaren, but I think the most recent races of Canada and Monaco and the curb riding issue that Red Bull have had prove that might well have happened, because I don't think they were that good heading into that race, Red Bull, compared to other races around that time. I think Sainz would have had a chance to win it anyway. But let's discount that for a second. He still needed to beat his teammate and 2 very fast McLarens. He was not in any danger. I appreciate he didn't, run off with it, but at no point did you think he was in any danger of being overtaken by those 3 drivers. He never looked in trouble. And I think, even though the Singapore win he had last year was very different, it was a great defensive display. In terms of his outright best win in F1, I think Australia takes it. I think he was so assured on that day. So yeah, I've got that 3rd.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. The only reason I included it on my list is because the omission of Verstappen.
Yes, fair. Yeah.
But I do think I remember looking through my ratings. I've rated him a 10 for this. He was brilliant and he thoroughly deserved to win that Grand Prix. But because Verstappen wasn't in it, I just don't know if I will put it at the ultimate drive. So my second place. Hold on, I've got it written down here. Oh, here it is. Yes, Fernando Alonso in China is my second place. Obviously,
nearly killed himself, but
yeah,
other than that.
Right, nearly died. Also took out Carlos Sainz in, I think, the sprint race, right? But then ends up getting 7th place in the feature race, gets the fastest lap as well. He outdrove that Aston Martin at that time as well. He comfortably beats the likes of Piastri's right on the back of the Mercedes as well. It was just vintage Alonso in what we love to go and see. So I just think that is pure Alonso, outdriving the car, scoring points where he shouldn't be scoring points. It was just a great drive all round from him. And I really think it went under the radar a little bit, just how good he was around China.
Second place for me. Same race, different driver. I've got Verstappen's win in China in second place. He won by 13 seconds, despite the fact that there was a safety car pretty much dead in the middle of this race. And at the point the safety car came out, he had a massive advantage. I have no idea what the gap would have been if there wasn't a safety car, but I think he would have been a pit stop and a half ahead of everyone else. That's how dominant he was that race. And of course, he only lost the fastest lap because of Alonso's pit stop, which even with that, the consistency that he was turning in like 1 minute 38, 1 minute 39 laps was pretty phenomenal. So even by Verstappen standards, I thought that race was very impressive from him.
Well, I'm not going to build any suspense because that was my number one. Yeah, Verstappen at China was on another planet. Even for Verstappen's level, it was a pure world champions drive. The pace that he displayed lap after lap was phenomenal. He was unchallenged. Obviously, the sprint race wasn't as simple, but he still managed to claw that one back. It was just a brilliant, brilliant moment for him. It really highlighted just what Max Verstappen can do when him and Car are in unison. So yeah, that was number one. But Ben, something new, I imagine, from you then.
It is. It's a different Verstappen win. It's the win. It's his first win of the season, Bahrain.
Oh, Bahrain. Okay.
He had a grand slam that race, so he got pole position by I think about 0.2 of a second. Led every lap, had the fastest lap, won by 22 seconds, which around Bahrain that's about a pit stop. Try and poke holes in that. Like there's not much you can do. That is literally everything you can do on a race weekend. And he was in no danger whatsoever from anyone.
Yeah, totally fair. It was up there in and that top five for me is very, very close. Like there's 4 or 5 drives that should have, if I had, more numbers to fill, would have been on this list. Some of the mentions like Albon in Monaco, for example, Gasly in Miami also deserves a bit of a shout. There's a couple of Bottas drives where he was fantastic. He deserves more. So, there were loads of drives around that I thought, bloody hell, they were good. And they've missed out because of it.
Okay, that's our top 5 performances of the season so far. Let us know in the comments. If you're on Spotify, you can answer the poll that's always there. Let us know, firstly, did you enjoy that as a segment? And secondly, if you want it to come back, what should we do next? We're very interested to know different categories.
YouTube as well, please.
YouTube as well. Yeah, 100%. Let us know. If you hated it, just let us know you hated it and we won't bring it back. But
no more ranking lists. Say that.
Yes. Thought we'd try something else. So I hope you enjoyed. That's going to do it for today's episode, Sam. We're back in preview mode on Wednesday.
We are back in preview mode on Wednesday. Ben, is there going to be a question of the week on social media tomorrow?
Yeah, there should be.
We not recording outcries for it.
Did we?
We did. We had a few people message going, why is there no question of the week this week?
You see. If we have to record early in a week on a Monday, as we did last week, then it's difficult to get a question of the week out. But when we record, as we normally do on a Wednesday, which we are this week, there's no reason why you won't get a question of the week. So there will be something.
We just have to think of one.
Question of the week. Why wasn't there a question of the week last week?
That actually might be a good one.
Well,
who knows? We'll hold on to that. Folks, thanks for listening. As always, we always appreciate your support on the non-race weekends because it is just general F1 chat. So it means even more that you turn up for these ones. We're streaming now. Go and follow our Twitch, Late Breaking Podcast on there. This is on YouTube, Late Breaking F1. Follow us on social media, Late Breaking F1. The Discord's in the description. If you want to join, Patreon, live show, tickets, go and get one. We're going to have a great time. People have bought them already. It's in Greenwich, London. Go and pick one up. We'll have a lovely time seeing you all in person. Thank you for your support. I think that's everything. So we'll see you midweek. And of course, if you're on the Patreon, make sure you check out the content. Be Breaking's just gone live as well. It's a really good one this month. Thanks again. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
And I've been Ben Hocking. And remember, keep breaking late.